Good morning, everyone. I'm Philip Hu, Curator of Asian Art here at the St. Louis Art Museum, and it is my great pleasure to be with you this morning, both in person and virtually for those of you watching through the live stream. It's also my great pleasure to introduce today's speakers, but here's a bit of information about the exhibition. Today's lecture is in conjunction with Global Threads, the Art and Fashion of Indian Chintz, an exhibition organized and circulated by the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, Canada. This exhibition traces the fascinating history, global transmission, and contemporary influence of painted and printed cotton textiles from India, popularly known as chintz. Largely drawn from the collection of Indian chintz at the Royal Ontario Museum, the exhibition also features works from private collections and complementary objects from the St. Louis Art Museum collection. Also, the museum is pleased to recognize the annual operating support received from the Missouri Arts Council, a state agency, and the National Endowment for the Arts that helped to make this exhibition possible. If you haven't had a chance to visit the exhibition, I highly recommend that you do so before it closes on January 8th, 2023. Today, we are lucky enough to have two speakers, Charllotte Kwon and Tim McLaughlin. Charllotte is the founder of the Maiwa School of Textiles and the owner of Maiwa Handprints. Under her direction, Maiwa conducts extensive natural dye recipe development and maintains a textile archive and research library. Together with Tim, Charllotte has produced 4 documentary films and a number of print publications. She also guides Maiwa's substantial online presence and natural dye site, that is naturaldyes.ca for Canada. An expert in natural dyes, she has traveled the world studying, teaching, and working with artists in traditional techniques in India, Peru, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and in Canada itself. In 2013, she was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of the Fraser Valley for her advocacy of traditional craft and natural dye use. She is the recipient of the 2017 Robert Jekyll Award for Leadership in Craft. Tim McLaughlin is a Canadian artist, writer, and photographer. Presently, he is active in the production of small batches of traditional handmade inks. He also teaches ink making and researches natural dye use. In partnership with Charllotte and Maiwa Handprints, Tim documents artisan communities and advocates for the importance and continuation of traditional craft and culture. This collaboration has resulted in the Thames and Hudson publication, Textiles of the Banjara, Cloth and Culture of a Wandering Tribe, in 2016. Tim has recently been authoring an in-depth science course for those working with natural dyes. The course aims to make the power of a scientific approach to natural color more accessible to artisans. Please join me in welcoming Charllotte and Tim to the podium.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks to everybody who's made it possible for us to be here, to come from Vancouver and made it so smooth and so easy to get here in my mind. What an amazing exhibition this is. It's just such a joy to see it here. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome you all to Still in Print, Natural Color on Cotton, from Ajrakh to Kalamkari.
Let's start by talking about names. Chintz and calico. The term chintz identifies a variety of painted or printed cotton textiles which were produced for international trade. Indian chintz were created by mordant dyeing cotton with natural color, a technique which resulted in fast, bright colors which did not easily fade. A calico is a plain weave cotton, but over the years the word calico has also come to be associated with printed cottons. This was especially true once the production of chintz moved to European centers. England's attempts to regulate the textile trade resulted in the Calico Acts of 1700 and 1721. In the 19th century, manuals of dyeing technology were intended for use by calico printers, such as Charles O'Neill's 1869 Dictionary of Dyeing and Calico Printing. In this talk, we will refer to the textiles by the names which contemporary artisans use. If we understand chintz to be a cotton textile printed with natural dyes, then the production of chintz is still very much alive and well in India. There are at least 4 types of printed cottons being made for international trade: Ajrakh, Dabu, Bagh, and Kalamkari. We'd like to briefly introduce you to these textiles and the communities that make them.
Ajrakh identifies a cotton cloth printed with natural dyes in a particular geometric style. An Ajrakh is a traditional textile. There are many such traditional textiles in India, as clothing, cloth, and pattern are often associated with and can come to define one's cultural group. This is Dr. Ishmael Khatri, a traditional Ajrakh printer whom we've known and worked with now for almost 30 years. Historically, Ajrakh cloths were immersion treated with myrobalan and tannin, then printed with alum or iron mordants, and finally immersion dyed with indigo and madder. In this photo, contemporary Ajrakhs are being washed after the final printing. As traditional textiles, Ajrakh was made for a specific clientele, the Muldari herder community of the Kachchh Desert in Western India. As with many communities, not all modern Muldaris wish to maintain traditional dress. For those who do, imitation Ajrakh is available at a fraction of the cost of the locally made cloth. In the local market, one may find silk-screened Ajrakh and even synthetic printed Ajrakh produced in China for the Indian market. So we have an interesting situation where the clothing of a traditional group can be screen printed with synthetic dyes in an offshore factory quite cheaply. The dyers of Kachchh, known as Khatris, who were trying to keep wooden block printing with natural dyes alive, lost their local market. To maintain the viability of naturally dyed cloth, Ajrakh printers have transitioned to an international market. Instead of trying to compete in the production of cheap textiles, many of the Khatris moved in the opposite direction. They began to make museum-quality collector pieces. Jabbar is the younger brother of Ishmael, the printer we just met earlier. He and his family of artisans now produce spectacular works, such as the one shown here. Jabbar is making new, never-seen-before works, yet his work remains true to the geometric origins of Ajrakh and also the traditional printing process. The complexity of Jabbar's innovations requires special blocks to be cut. It also demands considerable mental focus during the printing process.
Mahesh Desai lives about 30 kilometers outside of the city of Jaipur in the heart of Rajasthan. Mahesh belongs to the Chippa community, a hereditary group of block printers. He is also the head of an artisan family who specialize in a printing process known as Dabu. Dabu is a mud resist. One makes Dabu with the feet in much the same way one might stomp on grapes to make wine. The mixing is done in specially made cement basin. One of the key ingredients of Dabu is clay from the local riverbank. The final mixture needs to have the right viscosity in order to easily be picked up by the block and also easily transferred to the cloth without bleeding. The Dabu resist is effective in cold water dye baths such as indigo. Like Ajrakh, Dabu prints were traditionally sold to a local market, the Kisan farmer community. The nature of the resist is such that it does not provide fine details, but it lends itself well to multiple figures on an open ground. Unlike Ajrakh, with its slow, exact registration, seasoned Dabu printers can work at an incredible pace.
This is our third type of textile, the Bagh print. So far, we've had Ajrakh, named after cloth, originally for a particular community. We have Dabu, named after a mud resist, and Bagh, named after a place. Bagh is located in central India, in the state of Madhya Pradesh. It is thought that a group of block printers migrated here from the north about 400 years ago. The site was chosen because of the Bagh River, which not only provided a good washing site, but it is also thought that the water near Bagh flows over limestone, resulting in some dissolved calcium in the water. Calcium is a mineral which brightens madder reds. Bagh prints have a dramatic appearance. Artisans work mostly entirely with red, black, and white.
The last type of printed and painted cotton textile we'd like to look at is Kalamkari. The term Kalamkari originally identified a hand-painted textile. Kalam means pen, and so Kalamkari identified penwork. These are the original kalams, or pens, which are used to draw with natural dyes on cotton. They consist of a stick with one pointed end wrapped in jute thread or burlap sacking. The jute absorbs the dye and acts as a reservoir. The coarse jute threads are kept in place by fine cotton threads. The artisan can squeeze the jute reservoir and achieve a flow of dye. Kalams are simple, but surprisingly versatile tools. And as you might expect, even for a skilled artist, it takes a long time to hand paint a textile. And so, for hundreds of years, Kalamkaris have also been printed from wooden blocks. The finely carved blocks are used to print Persian-inspired floral motifs in a fraction of the time it would take to draw the lines by hand. As you've seen, printers usually thump the blocks by hand to get an imprint. However, the pressure required to get a clean imprint from such a large block has led Kalamkari artisans to use a pouncer, a special wooden mallet used to get an imprint.
These contemporary Kalamkaris are produced in South India in the studio of the late Mukhanty Ashwarudu. This is one of his masterworks produced in the studio. It shows a combination of hand-drawn lines and block-printed borders. Ashwarudu was a kind, gentle man. Behind his quiet personality was an intense belief in the power of craft and a commitment to his community and the beauty of natural dyes. He passed away in 2017, and we'd like to dedicate this talk to him.
India's painted and printed cottons, known as Chintz, Calico, Ajrakh, Daboo, Bagh, and Kalamkari. Where does the color come from? First, let us begin by offering a disclaimer to the natural dyers in the audience. We wanted to give a public talk suitable for non-specialists. To do that, we shall simplify and at times replace some of the complexity of natural dye use with metaphor and analogy. We hope that the substitution proves faithful to the beauty of the textiles. Let's start with 4 colors: blue, red, black, and white. Blue comes from the indigo plant. Red comes from the madder plant. Black comes from a combination of tannin and iron. And white comes from keeping all other colors off the fabric. What we just told you probably makes sense. We assume that color comes from something, and we put it on something. Color comes from a paint pot, a pen, or a crayon, and we put it on a wall, a page, or a fabric. When most of us think about natural color, we simply include plants as a source for color. To color fabric, it seems that you just need a way to get the color out of the plant and onto the cloth. But natural dyes do not work that way. And the artisans who made the textiles in this exhibition do not think about color in that way. For them, working with natural color on cloth is all about transformation. The transformation is a complex drama that involves 3 principal players: a dye, a mordant, and a fiber. The fiber is almost always cotton cloth. The dye always comes from something living, that is, something organic. Plants like madder and indigo, or insects like cochineal and lac. The mordant always comes from something inorganic, that is, something not living. Metallic salts like those of aluminum, iron, or copper. This is alum, potassium aluminum sulfate. Many of the textiles in this exhibition carry the description mordant dyed cotton. A mordant is not something you add to get a bit of color to stick to cloth. It's not an adhesive or a glue. Rather, a mordant starts out as a mineral salt, which dissolves in water, and it's transformed into an insoluble salt when it combines with the dye. Together, the dye and the mordant transform into a colored pigment which will not dissolve.
This makes sense when you think about it. If a pigment were soluble, it would wash off the first time the cloth got wet. But a dyer wants it to become insoluble so that it stays permanently on the cloth and does not dissolve when the cloth is washed. All organic matter is perishable. That is, it will break down at the end of its life. It rots or ferments or decomposes. But the dyer's art preserves that portion of the living matter that holds color. And if done right, it will preserve the color for the life of the cloth. We encourage you to think about the colors on these textiles in the way that we've just described. The transformations we've been talking about are complicated. It's a testament to the genius of these artisans that they developed, understood, and mastered such processes. The ability to mordant dyed cotton cloth with fast, bright colors was, and still is, an invaluable skill. Earlier, we said that black comes from a combination of tannin and iron. This is a variation on the same reaction between something living, in this case the tannin from nuts or barks, and something not living, iron. The combination of tannin and iron and an iron mordant produces a permanent black. By contrast now, alum is a clear mordant. When alum is used, it does not add its own color to the cloth of the dye. In fact, alum is the most widely used mordant in the world because, unlike iron, it is clear. When alum combines with a natural dye, the resulting colors are bright and true. Alum is probably the most valuable and widely traded commodity that you've never heard of. Before the rise of synthetic dyes, it was absolutely essential for fast color. Access to alum was almost as important to the nations of the past as access to oil is today. Let's go a little deeper. We've already said that artisan dyers have mastered a particular transformation of organic and inorganic matter, yet this is not enough. For the transformation needs to be site-specific. It needs to take place on the very fibers of the cloth. It needs to somehow bind with the fiber and stay there so that the color will be rubbed fast. Otherwise, the color may easily brush off a cloth in the same way that sand stuck to a wet beach towel would easily brush off once the towel dries. The secret of keeping color on plant fibers like cotton is that, in addition to a mordant and a dye, artisans treat the cotton with a tannin. In India, the preferred tannin comes from myrobalan nuts. These are sometimes known as Indian almonds. Here they are dried and ground into a powder. You couldn't eat them because they're loaded with tannin and it would be like trying to eat dried tea leaves. Dye historian and researcher Dominique Cardon, in her book Natural Dyes, quotes an Indian proverb, "Hara lage na fitkari rang choko aaye." Without myrobalan and alum, no color can be achieved.
The procedure, which is still commonly followed in India, is to treat the entire piece of cloth with myrobalan tannin. This is done after the cloth has been scoured. It's a cold process, so it can be done outside in a tub. Once the cloth is treated with a tannin, it has the interesting property that anywhere iron comes into contact with the cloth, it will form a black. If I want to draw a black line on my tannin-treated cloth, I can use a calum. The pens we saw earlier, made from twisted hemp, twine wound around a wooden stylus. This is Kalamkari artist Ajit Das from Bengal, whose work is in the exhibition. He still works with natural dyes using the traditional calum. One just needs a solution of iron water to draw black lines. If I'm a Kalamkari block printer, I can print with iron water using wooden printing blocks, and I'll create black outlines. The same is true of the Ajrakh process. Tannin and iron, wherever they meet, will create a nice, rich, permanent black. Incidentally, a variation on this combination of tannin and iron is what gives us iron gall ink, a permanent black ink known to Romans, and in use in Europe and the West since the time of the Byzantine Empire. In this short video clip, you can see that the iron solution is relatively weak, and it goes down a light color and oxidizes on the cloth, turning darker over a few minutes.
If I want to paint or print a red, I need two things in addition to the tannin already on the cloth. I need the alum mordant, and I need to extract the colorant from the madder root. But if I mix the alum and the dye together before painting or printing, that they will combine on their own and will not work well to color the cloth. So instead, artisans will paint or print with the alum only. Because alum is clear, many artisans add a color so that they can see where the alum is printed. In Kalamkari work, a pink is obtained from the dawa flowers. In the Ajrakh tradition, the alum is mixed with red clay and gum arabic. This creates a paste that will stick to the cloth and also lets the artisan know what has been printed. Now we have tannin and an alum mordant on the cloth. If we immersion dye this cloth in madder dye, we will obtain a red, but it will only be permanent where the alum is printed. If there's no alum present, the red dye will not stay. You're probably getting a sense of why we place so much emphasis on transformation. An artisan dyer knows what combinations of material are necessary and in what order to produce color only in a specific area. And this knowledge is absolutely essential to produce any kind of color design on cotton cloth through the use of natural dyes. So let's take a look at the materials in a bit more depth.
Madder is a creeping vine. It is harvested when it's a few years old or when the roots are the desired size. The dye components are found in the roots. There are two types of madder commonly used to give a red: Rubia tinctorum and Rubia cordifolia. Each contains a wealth of colorants, including a dominant dye molecule, which is red. The dominant colorant is different for each plant. Rubia tinctorum, shown here, contains alizarin, and Rubia cordifolia contains mungustan. Rubia cordifolia is the species most commonly used in India, so much so that it's also known as Indian madder.
So brace yourself, because very little of what we've explained to you is true for indigo. This is Adam Kachchh, another member of the Kachchh family of Ajrakh block printers that we've been meeting. Indigo, absolutely his favorite color. Indigo is the most famous of the natural dyes. It has a long and complex history in India, going back thousands of years. Indigo grows well in almost all of India. The Mughal plantations were found throughout Rajasthan. The British plantations were in Bihar and Bengal. And now many Indian artisans are starting to grow their own indigo, a situation that many have dreamed about for a very long time. The extraction of a blue dye from green leaves is an art as complicated and as demanding a skill as the production of a textile. For dyers, the color blue is always special. Indigo is not a mordant dye. That is, it does not need alum or tannin to dye cotton cloth. If one makes a vat of indigo dye and puts in a white cotton cloth, the entire cloth will become blue. When we make a successful indigo dye vat, we need to reduce the indigo so that it will dissolve. When it dissolves, it loses its blue color. The dye vat is a greenish yellow. We put in our cloth, and the dissolved indigo permeates the fibers of the cloth. When we take the cloth out of the dye vat, the indigo oxidizes and is transformed from the soluble greenish yellow back to an insoluble blue. A beautiful indigo blue.
And finally, let us consider white. If we wish to keep, If we wish to keep a portion of the cloth white, we need to use a block to use resist before the cloth is placed in the indigo vat. The resist most commonly used in Ajrakh is a combination of lime, a calcium powder, and gum, Arabic. This protects the cloth from the indigo dye, and because indigo is used cold, the resist will survive the dye bath. After dyeing, the resist can be washed off and revealing an area of white. If you've been following this rather complicated process, you will have noticed that any pattern, where it is and where it isn't, is largely controlled through the application of resists and mordants, not dyes. The two dye baths we've talked about, madder and indigo blue, are both immersion baths. If we put a plain cloth in the bath, the entire cloth will emerge colored. This is why we emphasize that a traditional dyer thinks about natural color in a very unusual way. The artisan dyer puts down color by considering the application of different mordants and resists, not dyes. It'll be equally evident that purpose dictates what can and cannot be done. Again, a modern person would look at a chintz and assume that it was created in the way a painter makes a painting. The artisan puts the color wherever they want it. But no, process dictates what colors may be used, how they are achieved, and thus where and how they may be placed.
We've given you just the most rudimentary outline of the process. There are many, many variations possible. For example, the artisan can change the strength of the alum, or the strength of the iron, or the strength of the dye, or the strength of the indigo vat. Thus, they arrive at lighter or darker colors. Artisans are constantly exploring and innovating. They're expanding their palettes of natural dyes that they use. They're always looking for ways to improve technique while not losing the heart of the craft or the deep sense of tradition. The knowledge and sophistication necessary to navigate botany, chemistry, color, and design is considerable. This realization, we hope, inspires our admiration for these exceptional artisans and their textiles. We'd like to conclude with a few thoughts about contemporary artisans. In the 1980s and 1990s, synthetic dyes were firmly established. They were viewed as the future of all color on cloth. At that time, artisans who believed in traditional methods were thought to be a bit foolish. For whatever reasons, they persisted and believed in their craft. They had faith. Today, that faith has turned into a valuable inheritance for their children and their children's children. Their estate, which consists in knowledge and ability, has not only endured, but expanded and multiplied. We encourage you all to look at the textiles in this exhibition a second time. Consider the colors and the skill that was required to make them. It never ceases to inspire us, and I hope that it will inspire all of you. To conclude, we've compiled a short video featuring the 4 artisan communities.
We seem to have lost the sound on the video.
Or the video. Maybe we don't have it.
Well, while perhaps someone maybe might be able to pull that up, let's maybe take questions and then maybe we'll come back to that if
Let's
that's
do that.
okay.
So we can have lights and
Yes.
yeah.
If we could have the lights up, please. Thank you. And we will see if anyone, if we can figure the video out. So I apologize.
Just a 10-minute video if they
We
are looking for it.
will have to work on it.
Okay.
But for now,
Okay.
let's take some questions.
Okay, does
Well, first,
anybody-
let's say thank you
You'll need to be here.
for a wonderful presentation. And Kira and I are here, so please just raise your hand if you have questions, and I will bring a microphone to you. Oh, all right.
Thank you for your presentation today. Very interesting. How did you get into this field originally, and what has kind of led you to what seems like a lifelong path working on this, and maybe any anecdotes you care to share about what seems like a significant amount of time you spent in India researching this?
Well, I'll make it really short because it's kind of a long story, but it's 30 some odd years, 35 years now. And yeah, I mean, India's home equally to Canada for me and for us. The family's all involved, and we have an amazing team. I have 35 staff in Vancouver and a huge team in India. And it's a life, and it's a life that I've just loved. But very far back, I ran a Heidelberg press, offset printing, and got lead poisoning from the inks. So it led me, I had to get out of the field, having got my ticket, but it led me into an understanding of color and its harm and its good, and it led me directly to natural dyes. And so that you can't find natural dye information or knowledge as deep and still relevant and still done and still in villages as you can in India. I mean, the knowledge in India for natural dyes and natural dyeing is amazing. So that was, it wasn't the first place I went, but I eventually ended up in India. And it became really love and a purpose and a life that I could spend finding connections for artisans who were deeply involved or wanted to return to natural dyes, finding the markets. So that's what we do. We're connectors. The art and the knowledge is definitely with the artisans. Yes.
So how long do the blocks last for the impressions?
It depends. Blocks made out of teak last for about 3,000 meters of printing. Our knowledge is in printed fabrics rather than painted and mixed of painted and printed. It's primarily printed. If they're a good teak block, sesame blocks last a little less, and there are cheaper blocks that one can get. But the blocks don't become. Usually, what happens is that you get all your blocks cut for your runs. And that's your finest runs. But then the blocks, they get not softer, but they get a little bit soft on the edges and around some of the definition of the design. Then they just become the next run. You just change your colors, you change how you're working with them, and they work into other designs so they can continue going. And then they're sold later as antiques.
So you talked about block printing and drawing, but are there textiles that incorporate other forms of pattern making, like brocade or embroidery or applique?
Sorry, hogging mic. Yeah, I mean, we work with embroiderers and out of Kachchh primarily. Some in Bengal with the kanta embroidery. We work with pattern in all ways. This particular talk was focused because of the show on pattern on cotton with natural dyes. With embroiderers we work with in Kachchh, we don't work with they don't work with natural dyed thread, and neither do we expect that from them. They buy the threads out in the market, and they're usually coats or DMC or whatever is what they're getting. But the design of what they do, it just blows you away every time we receive a shipment. It's so yeah, we work with we have our own finishing, like in a village. We work in Bagh, or that's where our home and where the staff go, and where we have our sewing studio and our own studio. All the sewing we do there. That also has to be quite carefully done because it's a factory of sewing machines and cutters and so forth would just absolutely ruin the fabric and ruin everything that all the artisans have done. So that's a whole nother side of things. And we train the artisans if they want to learn how to set up something in their own village. They can come and have a residency and learn how to do export quality finishing of their work. But yeah, we work with leather workers, an amazing group of leather workers in just outside of Biarwar. But we work with many different artisan groups in India.
Looks like we have the film.
Oh my God, do we have the film? Okay, one more question before we lose it.
For those of us lucky enough to go to India, like you, are there places you would recommend that people could visit? Like there's the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad. There's obviously for some of us, the Enoki Museum outside of Jaipur. Are there other locations or communities that would welcome a couple of Americans or more?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Kachchh in and of itself. So Kachchh is on the Pakistan border. It's in the state of Gujarat. But Kachchh is a confluence of artisans who have come from all kinds of, whether they've migrated from both east and west and north. And they've come from strife of war or famine or floods or mostly those three. And it's full of creatives and some many amazing villages. The whole place just kind of hums with creativity, as well as they have huge manufacturing plants for all kinds of things as well. But Calcutta, there's so many museums in Calcutta too, of Kantha, and small museums around. I'm trying to think of some of the names. I mean, in Kachchh too, there's the Museum of Embroidery. It's just outside Bajodi. Yeah, there's many. And if you go to the Mewa site, we have lots of connections with the artisans there that you can read up on. And we're happy to share that too. You can just email us.
Okay, so while we have it up, let's go
Okay.
ahead and play that video.
Yeah, we don't talk
Possibly,
here, so.
hopefully.
Oh.
They have practiced so much now. They know very well.
Thanks very much. And thanks for finding it, you guys.
Thank you so much, Charlotte and Tim, and thank you to everyone who came today. Hope you have a great day.